Okay, let's jump right into this. We're doing a deep dive today into Kenny Denton's book, a really specific and kind of fascinating story from music history.
Yeah, it's about a recording studio complex right next to Wembley Stadium in London. Started as Delane Lea Wembley, then it became the Music Center.
Exactly. We're looking at its life, the struggles, and how it all ended.
And we've got some great source material here. Articles, research, even some firsthand accounts, they really unpack the whole journey.
From this, super ambitious vision with all the latest tech.
Right, through some serious, serious challenges, a pretty dramatic turnaround, and then, well, eventually it just disappeared. Progress, I suppose.
Yeah. So our goal here is to pull out the key insights from all this material. Understand its birth, the unexpected bumps, the big turning points, and why this story, this studio story, actually matters.
It's a brilliant case study, really. Big dreams hitting hard reality. Shows you a lot about the forces at play, behind the scenes in music.
Totally. So let's start at the beginning. The sources say the land was bought in '69, right there next to the stadium.
Yep. And by 1971, this brand new purpose-built complex opens up on Engineers Way.
What was the big idea? Why build something so, ambitious way out there?
The vision was huge, technically driven by a guy named Dave Seidel. He wasn't just aiming for a few rooms. He wanted a cutting-edge, future-proof workspace.
Okay.
And get this, one key idea was a control room designed to minimize complex patching with jack plugs. That was really thinking ahead, aiming for a smoother workflow decades before it was common.
Wow. Okay, so technical innovation was baked in from the start. What gear did they actually open with?
Well, they had a computerized mixing console from Sound Techniques. Imagine that in '71.
Whoa.
Plus Scully tape machines, Lockwood Tannoy speakers for monitoring, and the team. Dave Siddle put together a really strong core audio crew.
Experienced people.
Definitely. Martin Birch and Louis Austin came over from Kingsway Studios. Then you had Alan Florence, Dave Hunt, Dick Plant, Kenny Denton, all from Pi, plus a technical assistant, Terry Yidden.
So a lot of talent.
Yeah, and they even staffed up the booking and accounts offices early on. Shows you how much they expected it to take off, right?
Right. So impressive tech, top staff, grand vision. Sounds like a recipe for instant success. But the sources say it hit turbulence almost immediately.
It did. The first big headache, and it's really clear in the material, was the location.
Wembley wasn't exactly central London, was it?
Not at all. Building this huge complex on the outskirts, away from the music industry hub, it was a massive gamble. One source described it like a grand ocean liner lacking the passengers.
Ouch. People just weren't making the trip out there easily.
Exactly. That whole build it and they will come idea, it kind of stalled because it was, out in the sticks, relatively speaking.
And the fancy equipment didn't smooth things over.
Quite the opposite, apparently. The sources are pretty blunt. The consoles, the machines, they were constantly breaking down.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you had guys like Martin Birch or Dave Hunt bringing in clients, proper sessions, and things would just descend into chaos because the gear wasn't reliable. Just serious teething problems for a month.
They even tested the place with a band that became rather well known later on, didn't they?
They did. Offered a free session to a young band called Smile.
Smile. Who became Queen.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It was partly to test the facilities, check for things like sound leakage between studios.
And did it leak?
The material says, yeah, it was noticeable. Just another thing on the list, And all these ongoing issues, understandably, started making the staff doubt Seidel's big vision. The reality just wasn't matching up.
Okay, so you've got this struggling studio location issues, gear breaking down, not getting booked. But then there's this huge event coming up. The official opening by Princess Margaret. How on earth did they pull that off?
Well, it was basically a massive exercise in stage management. The studios were not busy because of the breakdowns and everything, but they absolutely had to look busy for the princess.
So what, they faked it?
Pretty much. The plan was to offer free studio time to fill the diary.
Free time? Surely that worked.
You'd think. But even that was hard to arrange, which tells you how bad the technical problems were. People didn't want free time if the session was likely to collapse.
Wow.
They did manage to get one big booking for the actual day, though. Ken Dodd, with a full orchestra in Studio One, handled by Terry Johnson, who knew his stuff with orchestras from Decca.
Okay, so Studio One looked legit. What about the others?
That's where it gets funny. They literally filled the other studios with staff members and their friends pretending to be fictitious clients.
No way. That's amazing. So the princess arrives.
Yep. She arrives, tours Studio One, sees Ken Dodd and the orchestra, poses for the cameras. The sources say it all went smoothly. The illusion worked. the studio got its official royal opening.
A diplomatic victory, you could say. But behind the scenes, nothing had really changed, had it?
Not fundamentally, no. I mean, some albums were getting made. Martin Birch managed Thin Lizzy and Deep Purple sessions there, but overall, the place was still way too quiet for its size and ambition.
It sounds like something had to give.
Exactly. It just became obvious that things couldn't go on like this. Too much staff capacity, not enough work coming in, and that darn equipment was still unreliable.
So change was needed. How did it happen? Was it gradual or?
Oh, it was sudden and pretty dramatic, according to the accounts. One Monday morning, bang. Executives from the main Delaney HQ in Dean Street just showed up at Wembley.
Unannounced.
Seemed like it. They started questioning staff one by one. The atmosphere immediately got super tense. People noticed names being taken off office doors, including Dave Seidels.
Oof. The writing was on the wall.
Totally. Everyone felt it was about to be shut down completely. These execs were clearly there to take charge.
Must have been incredibly stressful for the staff.
Absolutely. Then they were all called into a meeting. And this new guy, Louis Ellman, was introduced as the new managing director.
Okay, the new boss arrives. What was his message?
The sources describe it as pretty blunt. He didn't sugarcoat anything, acknowledged the chaos, the mismanagement everyone knew was happening, declared everything was changing. Right now?
No messing around?
None. He said his own reputation was on the line, zero tolerance for mistakes, and he was going to completely overhaul the place.
And Dave Seidel, the original visionary.
His dismissal was announced right there in the meeting. Then Ellman basically said, if you can't get on board with this new direction, you can leave now. The sources mention it was their first real taste of that phrase, a new broom sweeps clean.
Wow. Talk about a shakeup.
And that new broom, it swept hard and fast. There's this one incident highlighted in the material, happened in Ellman's very first week. Really showed everyone what was what.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
Martin Birch, remember? Highly respected engineer, recorded Deep Purple there.
Yeah?
He arrived just half an hour late for a session, 30 minutes.
Okay. A bit late, but...
Ellman terminated his employment right there at the reception desk in front of everyone.
Fired. For being 30 minutes late, Martin Birch.
That's the story we have. Just like that. Apparently, it absolutely stunned everyone, left the staff completely unsettled.
I can imagine that sends a message.
A very clear one. It created this immediate atmosphere of high tension, constant unease. Everyone knew the game had changed. This was Ellman's show now, with totally different rules.
So a ruthless new manager takes control. What was the next big play to actually rescue the studio?
This is where it's really interesting. Late 1972, Louis Ellman orchestrates this major move, integrating CTS studios into the Wembley complex.
CTS, Scene Telesound Studios. They sound different. What was their deal?
Very different background. CTS started back in '56, based in Bayswater. Founded by people like Johnny Johnston, a jingle composer, Peter Kay, John Elliott. Their main game was TV ads and film scoring.
Ah, so orchestral work, soundtracks.
Exactly. They had a solid reputation, top-notch facilities specifically for that kind of work. Experienced engineers, too, like Peter Harris, John Richards, Dick Luzzi, a whole different world from rock and roll.
So Ellman brings this established, very different kind of audio company into the struggling, rock-focused Delaney Wembley. Sounds like oil and water, maybe?
You'd think. And initially there was a divide, but the material's really clear. This move, this integration was absolutely pivotal. It was the start of the studio's comeback.
And did they fix the gear problems alongside bringing in CTS? That seems crucial.
Oh, absolutely crucial, yes. The studios got renovated quickly, and they finally did major technical upgrades that sorted out those endless equipment nightmares.
Like what?
Reliable Neve consoles were installed, and new Studer multi-track machines. Big deal with the Snuders was they had interchangeable heads. You could switch between 16 and 24 track recording easily, flexibility.
So the gear finally worked.
The sources basically say, yeah, those infamous breakdowns that plagued the place from day one, they pretty much became a thing of the past after these upgrades.
Okay, so now we've got decisive management and reliable high-end gear. That's a much better picture. But you mentioned the potential culture clash. Delaney rock guys versus CTS film guys.
Yeah, and there was definitely a difference initially. CTS had this strong film and TV reputation, right? Their clients followed them to Wembley. But their whole approach was different.
How so?
Well, the sources mentioned things like CTS's engineers might use just 2 mics on a drum kit. Very precise, careful about levels, definitely avoiding going into the red on the meters.
Which must have seemed crazy to the rock engineers.
Totally. The Delane Lee crew, coming from rock, were all about pushing levels, getting that tape saturation, using the red zone deliberately sometimes, and just 2 mics on drums. By that time, for rock, unthinkable. You needed way more for that sound.
So literally 2 different philosophies under one roof.
For about the first 6 months, yeah, the separation was pretty noticeable. CTS mostly used Studio One and the projection rooms. Delane Lee's staff were mainly in 2, 3, and the remix room. Someone even mentioned they'd sit at different ends of the restaurant.
You could literally see the divide at lunchtime.
Yeah. But here's the interesting part from the material. Over time, as the place got busier, like really busy, those differences started to fade.
The workload forced them together.
Exactly. The sheer amount of work meant they had to interact, adapt, learn from each other. That constant pressure actually created a fusion of their skills and ways of working, something that probably wouldn't have happened if things had stayed quiet.
And with this fusion happening and things turning around, the studio got a new name too.
It did, officially renamed the Music Center.
And business picked up properly. The film work sounds impressive.
Oh, yeah. It brought loads of prestige, recording big orchestral scores, major films. But this part of the material offers a really key business insight.
Which is?
While the film work looked great, it involved huge amounts of setup. Microphones, stands, headphones for maybe 130 musicians, all for sessions that might only last a few days.
A lot of effort for the time booked.
Exactly. The income often didn't really match the massive effort involved.
So the glamorous stuff wasn't where the real money was.
The material is very clear here. The serious revenue, the profit, came from the rock band.
Because they booked longer.
Weeks, sometimes months at a time. Long block bookings, much less setup involved compared to a full orchestra. Louis Ellman himself confirmed this in feedback included in the sources. He said, yeah, Bond films and stuff. Great for the reputation, but didn't really make money. It was the pop work, rap pop, long bookings that paid the bills and made the place successful.
That's fascinating. Profit versus prestige. There's a brilliant anecdote that illustrates this, isn't there?
Oh, it's perfect. Paul McCartney, he ended up overdubbing the Wings Over America live album in Studio One for 10 months.
10 months, wow.
Yeah, and apparently John Richards, one of the CTS film scoring engineers, complained to Ellman, we can't get to Studio One for movie work because McCartney's basically moved in.
Ellman's reaction.
According to the account, just one word, great.
Yeah.
And that tells you everything about his focus, right? Where the money was.
Absolutely, speaks volumes. And talking of Eldon, the sources really paint him as the crucial figure in turning it all around. Not a tech guy like Seidel, though.
No, the material explicitly says he wasn't technically minded, but that gives us another key insight, doesn't it? Technical skill isn't always the main thing in running the business.
Right. What were Ellman's strengths then?
Charm, charisma, building relationships with clients, making sure they came back. He knew his job was fundamentally about making the place profitable for the board.
A pure businessman focused on the bottom line.
Totally. And a really sharp negotiator. Described as fair, but always getting excellent terms for the studio. There are a couple of great examples of his business brain in action.
Like the deal with Don Arden and Jet Records.
Yeah, that one's wild. Arden wanted a year-long block booking in Studio 3. Ellman, knowing Arden's reputation maybe wasn't spotless when it came to paying bills, he negotiated a fixed price, but apparently built in a 30% cushion, like extra margin, anticipating difficulty getting the full payment later, and he still got Arden to agree to it.
That's some serious foresight in negotiation. What was the other example?
It involved the disc-cutting engineer, Kevin Metcalf. Ellman set up this innovative deal. Kevin had a weekly revenue target. Anything he earned above that target, he got to keep.
A direct incentive.
And it worked like crazy. Kevin was super motivated, apparently often hitting his weekly target in just a few days, working flat out like 6 days a week to maximize his earnings. Genius incentive structure.
Very smart. Anything else Ellman did on the business side?
Yeah, one more clever thing. The building had loads of vacant office space upstairs. He rented it out to small record companies.
Just for the rent money?
Well, yes, that helped. But it also created this ecosystem, right? These record labels were right there in the building. Super convenient for them to book studio time downstairs. It fed business directly back into the music center.
A symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Very clever. So under Ellman, with CTS, the upgrades, these smart business moves, the music center becomes this really successful, buzzing place, mostly thanks to rock and pop block bookings. But, like we said at the start, it didn't last forever.
No, it didn't. The material puts it pretty simply. Progress dictated change. The complex finally closed down on June 24th, 2000.
And that closure was specifically for the Wembley Stadium redevelopment.
That's right. The whole area around the stadium was being massively redeveloped for the new stadium project.
Was that completely the end?
Well, there was a sort of brief afterlife. It temporarily reopened in 2002 as Phoenix Sound, run by Peter Fielder, but that didn't last long. The final curtain came in June 2004.
What happened then?
Demolished, completely gone, replaced by essentially a road leading towards the new stadium. Its physical footprint just vanished.
Wow. So what an incredible arc. Delane, Leah Wembley, then the Music Center, starts with this huge tech-forward vision, hits major problems, gets a dramatic, almost brutal management change.
Right. Then successfully merges these two different studio cultures, finds huge success by understanding the actual economics of the business, not just the prestige.
Thanks to some really shrewd management. And then ultimately gets swept away by external forces, by redevelopment.
Yeah, and looking at all this material together really lets you trace that entire journey. It's more than just a building's history, isn't it? It's about how technical ambition, location realities, management style, creative fusion, and, crucially, business sense all interact.
It really highlights that even the most creative, vibrant places are still businesses at heart. They're subject to market forces, financial realities, and big changes in the world around them.
Absolutely. It shows that innovation and passion are vital, sure, but you also need smart business practices, the ability to adapt, and even then, sometimes things beyond your control, like a massive stadium project, just change the landscape completely.
It's a powerful reminder. So as we wrap up this deep dive, thinking about that whole story, the rise, the transformation, the fall, what does the journey of Delane Lee Wembley, the Music Center, tell you, our listener, about the nature of change itself, especially how innovation, business pressures, and those big external forces are constantly reshaping even places that seem solid and successful? Something to think about.